Okay, everybody. My name is Philip Leeke, and for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been researching mis and disinformation. More commonly, we could refer to it with the unacademic term fake news. So, what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be talking about some problems connected to the spread of mis and disinformation online, in social media. And of course, we have the problems of generative AI and how it can create fake content. So I'll talk about some problems and some solutions with it. Okay. Before we start, perhaps I better start just giving a very brief definition of mis and disinformation. So, misinformation would be, simply put, information that is wrong or incorrect in some way, and it is being passed around by people in the media. So, it could be on different channels. It could be on Twitter, now X. It could be on Instagram. It could be on Facebook. So misinformation is simply information that is wrong, and people often don't know that it is wrong, but they are passing it around. Okay. Now, disinformation is often information that is, people know that it's wrong, and they are passing it around deliberately to influence people in some way, maybe to spread lies that are beneficial to one government over another government, or maybe to spread bad content about certain groups of people that results in racism and hatred. Okay, so we have these two terms, and they exist within the fake news infrastructure. So, one of the things that we need to do to start talking about this is I have a categorization scheme of what information disorder is. So, people don't really like the term fake news. Some people prefer the term information disorder. Now, that's almost like a medical term, like there's something wrong with the information. And we may question that term and be slightly skeptical about it because was there ever a time when information was not disordered? Is it possible to put it right? We've always had propaganda from different governments. It's not that fake news and mis and disinformation is new. The thing that is new is the speed that it can spread and the speed with which it can be turned into viral content. Okay. So, I'm saying that better, rather than thinking of fake news, we can think of information disorder while acknowledging that there might be some problems with that term. So I've got a number of categories that we can think about when we think about information disorder. This is from First Draft News. It's a very popular categorization scheme. And you can see things like, I'll just draw your attention to imposter content. So this is when people pretend to be a particular organization, like maybe they create a web page and they say it's the World Bank, but it's not actually the World Bank. And they try and scam you out of money. Maybe, they pretend to be, I don't know, the University of Liverpool, and they're not really the University of Liverpool. Maybe they pretend to be a fake person. So they are imposters, okay? So there's one type of information disorder. Another would be misleading content. Okay, so something about the context is wrong. Sometimes we make jokes about things, right? We make jokes, satire or parody, but the difference is everybody knows it's a joke. Okay, so we sometimes criticize people in power, powerful politicians, by making jokes about them, and things that are deliberately untrue, but everybody knows it's a joke. All right, so that type of content, satire or parody, is not really setting out to deceive anybody, whereas imposter content and misleading content and made up or fabricated content is something that is meant to deceive you. Okay? what we've got then, we've got a large misinformation ecosphere, if you like. And before I start, I want to draw your attention to a couple of books, because I could recommend a lot of different books. But I think these books, if I was reading on the subject, these are two books that I would recommend everybody reads. All right. The first was written by Carl Sagan back in the 90s, and it's called The Demon-Haunted World: Science as a Candle in the Dark. Okay, so now we look at, there was a lot of misinformation about COVID-19, about the vaccines, medical misinformation, things about anti-vaxxers. During the pandemic, there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation too. And Sagan's book is really saying that despite the problems with science, it kind of remains our only hope for truth and evidence to come out. Okay, we need the scientific method, however we think about it. All right. And so it's a very, very interesting book, and it does contain a lot of the scams, a lot of the lies, a lot of the kind of manipulated conspiracy theories that people talk about today, and it tries to deconstruct them and talk about them and show the importance of science. So I think it's a very good book, okay? Now, the other book on the other side, Merchants of Doubt, is by a professor for the public understanding of science, a woman called Naomi Oreskes. Merchants of Doubt, what does it mean? Well, the subtitle is How a Handful of Scientists Obscured the Truth on Issues from Tobacco Smoke to Global Warming. Right, so what it's about is how the tobacco companies established this organization called the Tobacco Industry Research Council, and they corrupted scientists by paying them money, and so that they would downplay the link between cigarette smoking and cancer. All right. So what we learn from this book, Merchants of Doubt. So merchant is somebody selling something, right? And what the tobacco industry wanted to do was to produce doubt in the minds of people that there was this link between cancer and cigarette smoke, okay? They wanted to create doubt. So what I'm trying to say is, on the one hand, we've got this book by Carl Sagan talking about the importance of science and the scientific method. And on the other hand, we've got this more recent book by Naomi Oreskes talking about how science is a human product and how it can be corrupted like any other product by big money and big power, if you like. So when we read those two books, we are introduced to a whole range of different issues connected to the type of things I'm talking about: misinformation, disinformation, fake news. So the important thing to realize about the Oreskes book is that it's interesting not just because it's talking about what we know about cigarette smoking and cancer, but it also claims that people who deny the reality of global climate change deniers, are being paid money from the fossil fuel companies in exactly the same way as those scientists in the 1950s were paid by tobacco companies to deny the link between smoking and cancer. All right? So the playbook is the same with the climate denial industry. So two important books that I would recommend you read, which will give you a very, very good introduction to the kind of things I'm going to be talking about. What I want to talk about now is a quote from Carl Sagan from The Demon-Haunted World. Okay, and this book was written in the 1990s, remember. It was written in the 1990s, maybe it was 1994. So a long time ago. And I want to read this quote, and you can see it up on the PowerPoint slide. Okay, and I'll explain it as I read it. Okay, so this is Carl Sagan in the introduction to The Demon-Haunted World, written in 1994, I think. I have a foreboding. So a foreboding simply means a fear. I'm scared of something, right? I have a foreboding of America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all of the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, so can even understand what is going on. When the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority. With our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. So Sagan's book, Science is a Candle in the Dark, is a reference to another book that was written hundreds of years ago when women were accused of being witches, right? And they were burnt and killed for various reasons. And there was a guy that wrote a book at that time, several hundred years ago, trying to use reason and rational argument to show that this burning of women as witches was, stupid and superstitious and dark. So that's what he's talking about when he talks about superstition and darkness. The time when we didn't have any science, when we were burning and killing people for all kinds of reasons. And then he goes on to say, and when the dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content. So good quality news, substantive content. In the enormously influential media, the 30-second sound bites, now down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming. So that means the simplest, easiest programs to understand that people will keep pushing out. Credulous presentations. So credulous presentations, credulous, to be credulous means not to be critical, not to ask critical questions, to believe what people tell you. Credulous presentations on pseudoscience, so things that are not really science, they're pseudoscience. And superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance. So that was written in 1994, I think, a long time ago. And we can say that maybe it was quite prophetic and useful. So moving on to the next slide, and I'm looking at something. I'm looking at a quote from the top of the thing that I've just read. Let's just take that. When awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few. So who are the people that control these awesome technological powers today? It's clearly that it's in the hands of the very few. We have Elon Musk, now the owner of X, formerly known as Twitter. We have Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook. And we have the President of the United States using these platforms to put out his, let's say, illiberal message and changes. So we might want to start asking ourselves a number of questions. Okay, so I'm going to ask you these questions for you guys to discuss and think about. And the first question I want to ask is, who should control this technology? Right, I'm talking about technology like Facebook. I'm talking about generative AI. I'm talking about Twitter or X. Who should control this technology? Should it be private companies? They know what's best for you. Should it be governments? Should it be the people? Should it be nobody? Should we just let it run wild and let's see what happens with it? So I don't have the answers to those questions, and I'm just going to ask you what you think about that. Also, I want to just address one issue that might be forming in your mind. Why is it important? Why should I care about any of this? Why does any of this matter? Well, I'm just going to give you a few reasons, because social media can influence elections. It can influence populations. It can influence people's political opinions. Okay, so people can produce whole fake lives on it, completely false personas. We can spread fake science. It can cause massive social harm. It can manipulate people. It can produce polarization and hatred. So polarization, I mean when people are divided, when they won't even speak to each other any longer. So we can see, for example, in America, that we have loads of people who absolutely love Donald Trump and loads of people who hate Donald Trump. And one thing that they have in common is that they both seem to hate each other and not trust each other. So this is what I mean by polarization, putting into extreme camps. So we get that because of the way the algorithms work on social media. And when we look at something, the algorithms recommend more of the same type of content. So one of the things we have to think about is how can we get outside our filter bubbles? So a filter bubble or an echo chamber. I don't want to keep having the same things recommended to me. So that's another question I will ask you. How can we get outside our filter bubbles or our echo chambers? Another reason why it matters is that it can reinforce stereotypes and conspiracy theories. So when I'm talking about conspiracy theories, I want to be clear what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the kind of silly conspiracy theories like, the moon landings are fake. Oh, the moon landings, nobody went to the moon. They actually filmed the moon landings in the back of a Hollywood studio. I'm not talking about those conspiracy theories. I'm talking about conspiracy theories that dehumanize people. So conspiracy theories that say, white people are being replaced by other nationalities. Or conspiracy theories that stereotype people. Asylum seekers are coming to the UK and, they're going to form an army and they're going to get rid of the indigenous people. These are all political conspiracy theories, and they dehumanize people and make them hate each other. So those are the type of things I'm talking about. So that's why it matters what happens with these technologies, okay? And I'm asking you a question. I've outlined some of the problems there, and I'm wondering if you can think of some of the harms of social media and give examples of the above. So I'm not focusing on the positive. This is a bit of a one-sided presentation in that I'm focusing on the negative. There are lots of positives of social media. People can come together. They can campaign against issues. They can join groups and try to stop bad things from happening. But I'm really focusing on the harms here rather than the negative thing, rather than the good things. All right, so one of the issues we have is, should it be free to just do whatever it wants? Should it be free to do whatever it wants? Should we say that anybody should be free to post whatever they want? So, for example, Meta, owned by Zuckerberg, they have abandoned fact-checking, right? Checking for facts and content moderation, and they've got this new thing on community guidelines. All right. So should we all be free to say whatever we want? Now, this is a very complex debate, and I want to try to put it in a context for you. So, long time ago, in 1784, a philosopher called Immanuel Kant wrote a little book about what is enlightenment, what is freedom, okay? What is freedom and enlightenment? And in that little book, he talked about how we could achieve a perpetual peace and various other things. But he said that one of the most important things we can do is have free speech in a public square. So everybody's free to say whatever we want. We can all have a debate, and nobody is frightened of speaking out. Why was that important to Kant? Because Kant thought that if we had that, the truth would emerge from those debates. So somebody who was talking a lot of nonsense and had a lot of prejudice and things like this, people would see that the person with the reasons and the facts and the evidence was telling the truth. So there was this hope that through the process of debate, the truth would emerge okay, which is surely a good thing, all right? That was the kind of hope for Kant. But let's just say the public square today. What's the public square today? Well, the public square today, so Kant was writing in 1784, the public square today is obviously social media. It's obviously the social platforms that people use to talk to each other, all right? So if we go forward to today and a modern scholar like Whitney Phillips. Now, Whitney Phillips wrote a kind of report sort of questioning some of these basic ideas. And it was called The Oxygen of Amplification. So amplification means to amplify, to make larger, to make bigger. Okay, so imagine a fire, and imagine a fire. A fire needs oxygen in order to breathe, in order to grow. A fire needs oxygen. So one of the problems that people have is with free speech is, we can post whatever we want now, and then we can say that's wrong. You're not telling the truth. You're lying. One of the problems with that is to rebut it, to rebut ideas that are wrong, to argue against ideas that are wrong on social media, okay, in the public square, on social media. To argue against some of these ideas is also to spread them, all right? So we're spreading the lies at the same time as we are arguing against them. Now, because people are not always very logical, there is no guarantee that the facts and evidence that we supply people with, they will be able to understand it or agree with it or go along with it. It might be the person who is full of hatred and emotion. That person might win the argument and might actually be more persuasive than the person with all the logic and the facts. So the question Whitney Phillips asks, which kind of goes against the whole Kantian tradition, should we actually argue against this stuff, or should we maintain a strategic silence and say nothing? Because there is no guarantee that people will believe what we're saying, and there's no guarantee they will be able to understand the evidence, and we also will be spreading it at the same time. So that's a difficult kind of debate that we're now having within social media. So my discussion question is to rebut, argue against, or to ignore. So my discussion question for you guys: you've seen something on social media that is obviously wrong and which promotes hatred. Would you, 1, argue against it and spread it at the same time? Would you, 2, maintain a strategic silence and hope it goes away? Would you, 3, say, oh, well, it depends? And if you're going to say it depends, like sometimes I would argue against it and sometimes I would be quiet, what does that depend on? What does it depend on? Like, what does it depend on you being quiet? What makes you be quiet? What makes you want to argue? What is it about the issue? So I have some questions there for you. All right, so we've got this problem with social media. We've got this problem with the spread of disinformation and various things. We have some potential solutions. So I'm going to go through the potential solutions. They include fact-checking, which, as I've told you, Meta has decided we don't need so many fact-checkers. We've got potentially critical thinking and developing critical information literacy. We've got the fact that we should try to get big money out of politics, so the political process is not corrupted by big money. How do we do that? I have absolutely no idea. We have content moderation, so people who check for misinformation and disinformation online and eliminate it. And of course, we have the hope of education. Those are some potential solutions that people argue for. What I would ask you to think about as a discussion question, what I would ask you to think about is what, if any, are potential problems with those solutions? Okay, what, if any, are the potential problems with those solutions? And another question that we need to think about is, if we're going to have an argument about things, about what's true and what's false, what's an opinion and what's a fact. So we need to possibly raise our awareness of what counts as evidence and what counts as knowledge. Okay, so firstly, we have to agree on this is evidence, this is knowledge. This is not evidence, this is not knowledge. So my question to you is it possible for us to develop criteria for the above? This is what counts as evidence, this is what counts as knowledge. And is it possible for all of us to agree on that criteria? This is a very big topic, and I've asked a number of questions to this topic, which I think are very, very important and that need to be addressed. And I hope you'll go away and think about them. And before I disappear, there's a couple of websites that I would recommend that you have a look at on some of these issues. One is an academic policy blog called The Conversation. So it has a lot of short articles written by academics. And if you write misinformation, if you write disinformation, if you write fake news in the search box, you will find a whole world of reading that you can explore on these topics with some evidence-based approaches to them. So I'd recommend you look at The Conversation, and in the search box, you look for articles on this topic. Okay, the other thing I'd recommend you have a look at the University of Oxford is something called the Free Speech Debate. So you need to basically Google Free Speech Debate, University of Oxford. And there's a whole range of things from different countries connected to the idea of free speech, what it is, how much we should have it, what is hate speech, what should be allowed, what should not be allowed. So I'd recommend that you have a look at these things as a follow-up to some of the issues that I have raised in the lecture. So I hope you've enjoyed my short thing, and thanks very much, and hope to see you sometime in the future. So I hope you've enjoyed my short thing, and thanks very much, and hope to see you sometime in the future.